Welcome back to the Explainer. So today we're talking about architecture. Now, I'm not talking about steel and concrete, but the digital architecture that literally makes up every single website you visit. Because when you strip away the beautiful designs, the sleek animations, and the interactive web apps we use every day, underneath it all, it's really just a document made of text. But here's the fascinating part. As search engines and artificial intelligence rapidly evolve, the underlying meaning of that text has absolutely never been more vital.
Okay, let's just dive right into this. Here is our architectural blueprint for today. We're going to start with the fundamental building blocks of HTML, move into semantics and document structure, explore interactivity with forms, and finally look at exactly how to survive this incoming SEO shift.
But before we look at any code at all, I want you to picture something with me. Imagine a house built entirely out of identical, completely unmarked cardboard boxes. It's got walls, a roof, rooms, but every single surface looks exactly the same. If you walked up to it, how would you even find the front door? How would you know which box is a window and which is a load-bearing wall? Well, this perfectly illustrates the total chaos of what web developers call a div soup web. So today, we're going to learn how to build a beautifully structured semantic architecture instead.
All right, Section 1, the building blocks of HTML. Let's look at the raw materials we need to pour our virtual foundation.
HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and at its heart, it's a fairly simple language. It's essentially made up of elements, or tags, that wrap around pieces of text to dictate exactly how a web browser should display them. It's just a way of telling the browser, hey, this right here is a heading, or this is a paragraph, or this is an image.
So every web developer uses these standard bricks to establish a baseline. You've got the HTML tag itself, which is the root wrapping the entire document. The head tag holds all the metadata, the stuff the user doesn't actually see, like the page title. The body tag holds everything the user does see. And then you have your structural basics, H1 through H6 for your headings in order of importance, P for paragraphs, A for the hyperlinks that actually make the web, and image tags for graphics. These are your absolute non-negotiables.
And then we have the div and the span. Now, these are incredibly common tags, but they are completely non-semantic. What that means is they don't tell the browser anything whatsoever about the content inside them. They are literally the identical cardboard boxes from our earlier analogy. In the early days of modern web design, developers used to just wrap everything in divs because it made it super easy to style with CSS. But overusing these generic tags, it creates a completely opaque, meaningless structure to anything that's trying to read the code.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, giving meaning with semantics. This is where we elevate our whole approach from just slapping a building together to building with distinct, intentional architectural meaning. Just compare the two approaches side by side and it's a massive aha moment. In a non-semantic setup, everything is just a generic div. Sure, a human developer might add class names like header and footer, but to a machine reading the raw HTML, those are just meaningless labels on identical cardboard boxes. But with semantic HTML, we use the actual header tag, the main tag, and the footer tag. These semantic tags naturally describe the content they enclose directly to the machine reading them. When you visualize it, it's just instantly clearer. It makes so much more sense for the developers who actually have to maintain the code and for the web browsers rendering it. There's literally no more guessing what a block of code does because the tag itself tells you right up front.
Now, you might be wondering, why does this matter quite so much? Well, here's a crucial point. Roughly 4 to 5% of the global population has some degree of vision loss, and many of these users rely on assistive technologies like screen readers to navigate the internet. A screen reader can't see a giant, bold, pink font and know that it's the main header. It relies entirely on your HTML tags. If your house is made of cardboard div boxes, a visually impaired user literally cannot find the front door. Semantic tags are the necessary road signs they need to navigate your virtual house.
Moving right along to Section 3, Document Structure in Practice. Let's actually see how these semantic elements map out a modern web page.
Think of these tags as the specialized rooms in our house. They take a chaotic mess of data and organize it into distinct functional areas. The header is your foyer. It holds the logo and intro. The nav is your hallway, guiding you through the house. The main tag, which, by the way, you should only use once per page, is your living room. That's the unique core content. Then you have articles for self-contained ideas, sections to group themes, asides for peripheral sidebars, and the footer. Well, that's the basement archives where you keep the fine print and copyright links.
When you put it all together into a full-page layout, notice how neatly nested everything is.
We start at the top with the header, containing our H1 title and our nav. Then we drop down into the main section, which holds our core article and an aside for some related links. And finally, we cap the whole thing off with the footer. Everything seamlessly fits together. The structure makes complete logical sense before we ever even apply a single drop of paint or CSS styling.
All right, Section 4, interactivity through web forms. This is where things get dynamic, establishing two-way communication between the user's browser and the web server.
If tags are the rooms, forms are essentially the functional doors and windows of our digital house. You've got your standard text boxes and password boxes, but what's really cool is how HTML5 introduced things like the email, number, and tel types. These handle data validation right out of the box. For example, if you use the email input type, the browser automatically warns the user if they forget the @ symbol. It saves developers from having to write a bunch of custom JavaScript just to check for a typo.
So how does a form actually work? What's the journey? First, the user fills out the interface elements. Second, when they hit submit, the browser encodes that data and sends it off in an HTTP request, usually using a GET or POST method. Finally, the server securely processes the data. And listen, here is a golden rule pulled straight from our sources. You can never, ever fully trust data supplied by the client computer. Malicious users can and will inject code into forms. That is exactly why server-side processing, using languages like PHP, Python, or Node, is an absolute requirement to sanitize that data and keep your virtual house secure.
And that brings us to our climax, Section 5, Surviving the SEO Shift. We're dropping into the startling realities of the 2026 SEO landscape and why this semantic architecture we've been talking about is literally your ultimate survival tool. What's really wild here is the massive scale of disruption this represents. According to data from White Hat SEO, by 2025, almost a quarter, 24.6%, of all search results were heavily populated by AI overviews. Generative AI is fundamentally shifting how websites are discovered. Users just aren't endlessly scrolling through blue links anymore. The AI is reading the links for them and summarizing the answers right at the very top of the page.
And the fallout from that shift? It's staggering. For search queries affected by these AI overviews, there has been a 61% drop in traditional organic click-through rates. Just let that sink in for a second. 61%. If you're still relying solely on old-school, traditional SEO strategies, your traffic is very likely hemorrhaging right now.
So, what's the solution? How do we survive this? Well, the core pillars of SEO are still there, but the execution has totally changed. Search engines and their AI counterparts now ruthlessly prioritize well-structured semantic tags. They are hunting for EEAT signals: experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And here's the crucial connection. Semantic HTML is no longer just a nice-to-have for clean code. It's the required architectural blueprint that feeds those EEAT signals directly into the AI algorithms. If the AI can't parse your generic div soup, it simply won't feature you in the AI overview. I really want to emphasize this core truth pulled directly from our source material. EEAT signals determine who gets cited by AI and who ranks organically. Good code isn't just about human accessibility anymore, as important as that is. It is the absolute, non-negotiable foundation for the future of search visibility. You have to build a house that a machine can navigate effortlessly. Which leaves us with this final, absolutely vital question. Take a look at your own code. Look at the foundation of your digital presence. When the AI reads your website tomorrow, is it going to understand what you built? Or will it just see a confusing pile of identical cardboard boxes? I invite you to take what you've learned here today, dive deeper into semantic web development, and make sure your virtual house is built to last. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.